Yep. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone. We've just pressed live, so we should be. You guys should hear us any second now. Yeah, I guess we're live now.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. So we have Mo on the line and Stefan. Me and Stefan, we are the co-presenters. You've probably seen us to the last editions of the regional ProductTank, and then we have Mo all the way from Canada. He's gonna talk about key metrics for product managers. Mo, you wanna give a short intro about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Mo. I'll do a little bit of that, but I've kind of worked I did engineering in my undergrad and worked in all over different companies, including Apple in California. Worked at big companies like Bell, and also helped to launch one of Canada's largest online grocery platforms, and so really got behind a lot of good product development efforts. So excited about those, but then I'll go over that in my slides as well.
Yeah, and just short input from my side. I'm following Mo on LinkedIn, and he has this right size of daily product-related info, super concentrated. And it's whenever I scroll to LinkedIn, I always stop to take my 1 or 2 minutes of insights there.
We lost you for a second, Mihai, but I think what you wanted to say is that the content that Mo provides is great value.
Yeah,
Mihai, we're losing you.
Like the 1 or 2 minutes of. Okay, let me try and switch my connection.
Okay, we've got you now. So Mo just organized an event yesterday with it was 6 speakers, right? Out of which 5 actually had a speech. How do you feel about it? How did it go?
I think it went really well. I think it's the world is becoming more product led, and it's important for companies and organizations to understand what the best practices are, because there are inefficient ways to do things and there's efficient ways to do things, and the gap between companies that are doing it well and those that aren't is massive. And so, having these conferences allows people of all sorts to understand, from the gold class, the best class, how are you supposed to be doing it? Because you'll end up wasting a lot of resources if you don't do it properly. So I thought the conference went really well, and the insights around innovation are really, really critical. So overall, I think it was really, really well done.
Awesome. Do you have like a favorite speaker that you would recommend for us to follow besides you? We know you're a good speaker.
Yeah, so my favorite speaker is Bradley Horowitz. I think he's really fantastic. I think not a lot of people know about him, but his level of depth of how much he knows about innovation and how companies should innovate is quite fantastic, right? So, look, here's the thing, between over the last 70 years, 80% of the Fortune 500 companies don't exist anymore.
Right.
So if you don't innovate, you're going to not exist. So, it doesn't matter if you're a big bank right now with lots of users or lots of money, or you're a big company. None of that's relevant. It's if you will innovate, you're going to survive. And I think Bradley Horowitz, who has been doing innovation at Google for a really long time, did a great job of explaining how do you innovate? How do you create that machine? How do you create that invention machine? That means that your company is going to exist for longer than 80 years, where most companies don't.
You know who I like? I've also great insights, Mo. My second favorite would be Geoff Redfern, the guy from Atlassian, and with the presentation with the waves, the concept of waves, and staying ahead the technology. I think he had like a really super insightful and very smart approach to put things into perspective, and he really went super deep in depth with his presentation.
Yeah, totally. And that's interesting because when you think about investing ahead of the waves, if you can get in front of a wave, you will get most of the returns. Look at Tesla as an example. The Tesla stock was hovering anywhere from 5 to $60 for 10 years. But then all of a sudden it went from $60 to $600 in a matter of a month. And that's called investing in those people that got in front, right at the $60 in March, made most of the gain. So the key question to ask is, hey, what's the next Tesla? What's the next wave? And how do we get in front of that? Because if you don't get in front of it, you're going to be behind it, which means you're not going to get any returns. People investing in Tesla now, okay, their 10-15% is a decent return, but a 600 or an 800% return is even better, right? So whether you're building technology yourself or you're thinking about investing, you have to think about, well, how do I get in front of that S curve?
Definitely. We've skipped one important question that we usually ask our audience. Where are you guys tuning in from? Because we are promoting the event across several geographies, so we're always curious to find out more. As I said, Mo is tuning in from Canada. I'm currently based in my hometown in Romania, although usually I'm in Dubai. Stefan is also from Bucharest, Romania. What about everyone else? And in the meantime, our standard question for the speaker: if you can mention a book that has influenced your career, not necessarily related to product management.
What would that book be?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
book that has really influenced me recently is called The Messy Middle, and it's by the chief product officer of Adobe. And that really just talks about,
Okay.
look, we try to talk about processes, and try to talk about product development and entrepreneurship as it being something straightforward, but it's called the messy middle for a reason. No matter how clean you try to make it, it's going to be messy. And those people that embrace chaos, embrace that messiness, will be able to do well. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do well in certain 0 to 1 situations.
Okay. Interesting.
Sounds great. Should we start? It's been 7 minutes, 8 minutes almost.
Yeah.
Glad you say me hi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think. Mo, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right.
Okay, so let's go ahead. I'll add your presentation and remove ourselves, and happy lecturing. We'll see you at the end of the presentation.
With a Q&A.
See you then. Look forward to questions. All right, welcome everyone. Excited to be here. I thought I'd just start with a little bit of my background, as I said before. Essentially, I did engineering at the University of Waterloo. I got the tech bug working at Apple in California. I was like, this is fascinating. Technology moves really fast. I want to do more of this. And then I also, launched Product Faculty, which is a training school, which I'll talk a little bit about. So the story of Product Faculty, before we go into our presentation, is that about 5 years ago, I was an instructor at another leading training school in Canada. And I found that while I was working there, I was also a product lead for helping to launch North America's largest online grocery platform. I was the first PM on the business, helped and launch and scale this business from $40 million to well over $1 billion in 3 years. And while I was doing this, I found that the way that product management was being taught was great to help you get your first job, but it wasn't really valuable to help you excel on your role, which is why I launched Product Faculty, to help mid-career product managers essentially do well in their role. And we've had a lot of success. We've been ranked the #1 product management program for experienced product managers. Again, we don't really help you get into the role, but once you're in the role, we'll help you with that across a lot of different review sites, including Switch Up and Career Reports and Career Karma. And we find that we've been ranked as #1 because you can no longer, product management is becoming specialized. You can no longer have one instructor teach everything from strategy to discovery to experimentation. And so we have a multi-instructor model to help us do that. We also believe that coaching is paramount, because if you are a B2B product manager or a B2C product manager, a fintech or a health tech PM, all that's very different. And you got to make sure that you capture those differences through one-on-one human interactions. And so we have some upcoming cohorts, and check us out. So let's get into our presentation around mastering metrics. The way that we're going to go through today is going to be, I'm going to help you understand the different growth stages that companies go through. Then we're going to help you look at how retention analysis can help you get a deeper understanding of whether you found product market fit or how your company is doing. We'll help you define and launch features, and then we'll end with your metric toolkit, which you have available to you to help you do analysis. So common question, people ask is, well, why are metrics so important? Why do we even need metrics in the first place? Well, you think about it. If you're not using metrics, you're basically like madmen, right? Essentially, you're making decisions from your gut, and those decisions could be correct, but those decisions could be wrong. But what happens is you can easily be beaten out by people that are using metrics, that are really understanding the data to help them make decisions, and companies that are being product led. And we are seeing the effects of being product led faster and faster. Let's look at TikTok as an example. TikTok grew to over 1 billion users faster than any other product in the world. In 5 years, it grew to a billion users, and they're worth over $400 billion. That's 2 times that of Netflix, and that's more than the Disney company, which is a 100-year-old company. So change is happening faster and faster, and those companies that embrace being product led, and part of being product led is iterating, are going to be successful. So why are metrics important? Metrics are also important because they're fundamental to the lean process. You cannot have build, measure, and learn if you are not measuring metrics. Essentially, if you're not measuring metrics, you shouldn't even be called a product manager. You should be called a project manager, because you're just building to a project plan. So let's get into this a little bit more. So if we know that this is important, let's look at some definitions. So analytics, the measurement of metrics, allows you to measure movement towards your business goals, to say, well, how are we actually doing? This is our strategy. Are we actually moving towards it, or are we not moving towards it? So let's look at what a good metric is. If a good metric measures movement towards a business goal, your business goal should be a leading indicator of business outcomes that your company is trying to achieve. And so this is how it all ties together. You have your OKRs, which is your business objectives, and your product goal. Our product goals are leading indicators to figure out whether you're actually going to get there or not. All right. So let's look at the different product growth stages. Now, before we go into this framework, I want to recognize that there's a lot of other metrics frameworks out there. There's the famous Google Heart framework. You have probably heard of the AARR framework. You might have heard of level 1 metrics and level 2 metrics. All these frameworks are great, but what's missing here is that they don't tell you what is more important and what is less important. And that's why we'll be looking at everything today from a lens of retention, because retention can actually tell us a lot about how we're doing in each one of our different growth stages. So before we go into that, let's look at the different type of products that you can possibly have. So depending on the company that you're working in, you can be working for an engagement product, a revenue product, a SaaS-based product, or a utility. The difference between this is engagement-based products like CNN or TikTok or Facebook, are trying to maximize the engagement or the time you spend on products. Revenue-based products are those products that are trying to maximize revenue that you get in the product. SaaS products are products that help you either save money or make you more productive And utility products are those products that are sort of government types products, like the IRS or certain internal products that allow you to be more efficient. But a lot of times you don't have any other option other than to use those. Now, the retention framework that we're going to use, you'll see, is valid for 90% of the products. It's not as valuable for utility products, but most of the times you're not building utility products. Most of the time you're building products where retention is really, really important. Now, let's look at the growth stages of what happens as you develop an idea and find product market fit on it. So, first thing is, when you are building products, you have an idea. What you have to do is you have to find product market fit on that idea. Once you find product market fit, great, some users like it. How do you optimize that and get more people to adopt the product? And stage number 4 is around innovation. Now, what you're doing going from idea to product market fit is you're solving for product market fit. What you're doing going from product market fit to optimization is you're trying to maximize the juice. You're trying to, as a proverbial, squeeze the cow, get as much juice out of your products that have found product market fit. But you won't become a long-term viable company if you don't start to find new business models that help you, figure out, well, what's, we've been able to solve this problem. What are new problems that we can solve? And what you find here is that it turns out that the retention curve is a powerful tool to help you assess your performance through this entire process. So retention and just one single curve that we're going to go over can help you figure out, well, how are we doing across all of these stages? So let's get into that a little bit. Before we get into the curve, well, let's actually look at, well, what is retention? So retention, the definition of it is that it is defined as the percentage of people who come back to your product within a certain time period. That could be a day, a week, a month. And you measure retention in cohorts based on a group of people that joined on a specific date or a date range. It could be a week, it could be a month. Now, let's look at the autonomy of a retention curve. So, here's what the retention curve looks like, and I'll go through each one of these stages. Essentially, what the retention curve is showing you is it's the percent of customers that are retained over a certain period of time. Now, what is that blue line? What are we measuring? That blue line is actually your key action in your product. That is the most important action that your customers do, that most of your customers do. In this case, we've got a sample key action of users who sent at least 3 messages in a session. This is a messaging app. Your key action, we'll talk about how you figure that out. Now, what you have is percentages. Now, what you have is the percent of users joining your product up to 100%. How many of them will continue to perform that key action over and over again over a 28-day period? So this is the autonomy of a retention curve. And what this curve is showing is that 20% of your users that joined in this cohort are retained over a 30-day period. It turns out that this one curve is telling us a lot about a product. Now, let's talk about the key action, which is a really important piece. How do you identify your key action in your product, that thing that we're measuring? So, at the heart of the retention curve is your key action. Your key action is an action that most of your users perform in your product that causes them to return over and over again. So it's your key action is essentially the action that a lot of users are performing that causes them to come back over and over again. And it's what product managers have to do is they have to discover this key action, they have to measure it and improve it in order to have a strong product. Now, let's look at some sample key actions for different types of products. For Spotify, the key action is listening to music. Well, when people listen to music on Spotify, they're getting value from the product. And the key action metric is listening to music for about 5 minutes. It turns out that, if most users are doing this, that is a great key action. Instacart, which is an online shopping app, the key action is placing an order. And for YouTube, the key action is watching a video for 5 minutes. What do you think the key action is for Facebook? Well, people, most people scroll the feed. And so scrolling the feed for 30 seconds is a hypothetical key action that most people do. So coming out of this, you now have an understanding of what a retention curve is and what is the key action that you're measuring. Now let's go back to our growth stages and look at this framework to look at, well, how can we look at this curve, a retention curve, to know whether we found product market fit or not? Well, to do this, we're going to jump in and look at the retention curve of 2 different products. So what you see here is the red line is persona A, which is a certain persona that's using your product. What you find here is that 100% of users are joining, but then within about 17 days, 0 of them remain. So that's persona A. Persona B, you have 100% of users starting in your product, and around 35% remain. And so out of these, how do you know which one is found product market fit? Well, if persona A has gone to 0, that means that they have not found product market fit, and that the users that join a certain cohort, all of them go to 0. That means that the product hasn't found product market fit. Persona B, it turns out that users that join, about 35% of them to stay over a 20-day period, means that they have found product market fit. And this is really pioneered by Alex Schultz, who's the VP of product at Facebook, who looked at, one of the key reasons why Facebook grew was because they had this strong retention. Strong retention is the foundation of long-term viable growth. So that's the way that you can know whether you have product market fit on your product or not. Now, once you've found product market fit on a product, you want to juice it. You want to get as much out of the product as possible. And that's the next stage of our product growth stage framework. So there's 2 ways to optimize retention once you find product market fit on your product. Number 1 is to improve retention on an existing product. So for existing users, so the users that you found product market fit on, how can we make product improvements to make that better? The second one is to find new segments that are brand new and find product market fit on those. Let's look at each one of these examples. So for the first one, you have persona A, and what this is showing is that for persona A, around 20% of them have found a remain in your product over a 30-day period. Now, you can improve that retention, and what you find is you've listened to your customers, you've looked at the data, and you have made improvements, and now you've successfully moved that retention curve up from 15% to 35%. And that's an example of taking your main core user base and improving retention on them. Now, that's one way, but another way is you could find brand new personas that never even considered your product, bring them into your product and improve retention for those. So going back to our chart here, the first thing we did was we took our core persona A, and moved the retention up for them. Great. Then we find another persona that was using our product but hadn't found product market fit for it, because we needed to make changes for this. So persona B essentially was starting at 100%, but within 15 days, 0 of that persona remained. So you make some product improvements, you make the product better for them, you listen to that new persona, and now what you find is you've been able to take a persona who was joining a cohort and going to 0 to now having around 20% retention. So that's great. So those are 2 ways of improving retention for your product. Is number 1 is improve the core persona, and number 2 is introduce new personas and find product market fit on those. So going back to our product growth stage framework, once you have improved retention and gotten the most out of all the different personas, really what you want to do is you want to become a long-term viable company. In order to be a long-term viable company, you have to find brand new use cases. You have to really be disruptive. You have to go and find new S curves if you want to be a long-term viable company, because the consequences of not doing that is that you're going to end up like Nokia. In that, Nokia, they said, we did nothing wrong, but somehow we lost. This isn't just Nokia. This is quite interesting in that over the last 70 years, 80% of the Fortune 500 companies don't exist anymore. So the Fortune 500 companies are the largest companies that according to their market cap, will not exist in 80 years. And so what that means is if you're not innovating, if you're not finding brand new businesses, you're not building an invention machine, you're not going to be able to be a long-term viable company. And the best companies, like the FANG companies like Google, recognize this, right? So what did Google do? Google essentially, in 2000 and about 5 years, actually around 10 years ago, what Google did was they split up into Alphabet A and Alphabet B. And they did this because Alphabet A, which is the core Google business, was innovating, but they weren't innovating fast enough. So they took Alphabet B, which is half of Google, and got Alphabet B to invest in what's called moonshots. Now, what are moonshots? Moonshots are investments that will make your finance department nervous, right? So really, really risky investments. But Google feels that the next moonshot, the next Google will come from one of these moonshots. So, it's really important to realize this. And for companies to innovate is critical to their long-term success. So what did we see here? We saw here that depending on the different growth stages that you're trying to be at for your company, it turns out that the retention curve is a powerful tool to help you assess how you're doing in each one of these stages. Now, there are different ways of calculating retention, and we'll go over what those are. The most common way is what's called end-day retention. And end-day retention essentially is for products where you expect usage on a continuous basis. So, for example, Spotify, you expect people are going to be using the products on a daily basis. So you'd use that, you'd use end-day retention. For products where you don't expect usage to be that regular, and that like when people shop on Nike.com, people are not shopping on a daily basis unless you're super rich. But like you're not going to be shopping on Nike every single day, right? So that's where you would use what's called unbounded retention to help you measure retention of that type of product where the usage isn't that regular. Now, how do you know if retention is so important and we can tell so much from this curve? How do you know that your retention is good? How do you know you're doing good? Well, Mixpanel has some really great data on this, and what they found is that for most products, if you want to be at the 50th percentile, if you get to 20% retention over an 8-week period, you're good. So what that means is if you've launched a new product and you are in the media industry or SaaS industry or finance industry, and your retention is around 20% in 8 weeks, you've essentially found product market fit because you are similar to what is at the 80th percentile, 50th percentile of most companies. Now, if you want to be elite at the 90th percentile, then obviously the curves go up and you're looking at better stats here. So we've talked a lot about how do you come up with the retention curve? How do you define your success? Now let's get into defining feature launches. As a product manager or product leader, you are working on features. So let's get a little bit more granular and talk about your job as launching features. So what's the 4-step process of launching features? Number one is you have to understand what your business objective is and your role in influencing them. Next, define a retention metric that will help you evaluate the success of the feature that you've just launched. The third thing you want to do is you want to understand guardrail metrics. So guardrail metrics are essentially metrics that are making sure that the opposite of what you want to do isn't messed up. So you always want to measure, you want conversion to go up, but you don't want this other part of the product to be effective in a negative way. And step number 4 is essentially launching new features. Now, let's go through each one of these steps. Step 1, understanding business objectives and how your role influences them. So we've got a bunch of examples here for a couple of products. So if you are a music streaming product and you are a product manager for search, You could be launching a feature that allows you to search by artist location. So that could not exist, in the past it couldn't exist, but now you're doing that. If you are a product manager for a mobile shopping app, you could be working on payments. And the feature that you're adding is a new payment option like American Express during the checkout journey. And finally, if you are a B2B CRM product manager, you could be working on integrations and you are leading the Zapier integration. Now, those are some examples. Let's look at how do we define a retention metric for each one of these. We know that retention is so important. So you can actually measure each feature you launch, how well does that retain customers? And if it doesn't, you should think, well, do we really need this? So for the first example of a music streaming app, a hypothetical retention metric could be that you want at least 1% of search volume to use search by artist location over a 30-day period. That's an example of a great retention metric. An example of a retention metrics for if you are a product manager for payments is that you want at least 2% of payment volume used by Amex over a 3-month period. And finally, if you are a product manager for a CRM company and you're launching a Zapier integration, your retention could be you want at least 5% of users to use Zapier integration over a 30-day period. So those are some examples of how you can actually look at a feature and understand how that is going to affect your retention properly. Now, you've got your retention metric. What you always want to do, great product managers and great product leaders, don't just assume that they launched a feature and that's going to be great. What you want to do is you want to look, well, what adverse effects can this have? And how do we protect against those? What are the guardrail metrics that we're going to be watching out for? So an example of a guardrail metric for the music streaming app is that if you are launching a search by artist location, you want to make sure that search abandonment doesn't go up. The reason that search abandonment possibly could go up is that by adding so many new search options, it could overwhelm the users, and they could essentially leave. So you want to make sure that when you add this feature, abandonment doesn't go up. If you're a product manager for payments, the thing that you want to watch out for from a guardrail metrics standpoint is that you don't want cannibalization of your other payment options. So no more than 10% cannibalization of other payment options because Amex fees are really expensive. And last but not least, if you are an integrations PM, the thing that you want to watch out for is that, again, you don't want page abandonment because of the paradox of choice. If you give so many choices to customers of different integration options, they might leave. And so you want to make sure you're watching for page abandonment on the integrations page. And once you've done all that, and you can essentially go ahead and launch your features. Look, you want to be metrics driven. You don't want to make sure that you don't do this. The era of madmen is over. Companies are becoming more product led. You cannot just sit there in your nice office and know how customers are going to be using their product. You got to be product led, because if you're not product led, you're going to be taken over by companies that are being product led and that are being metrics oriented. And we've seen clearly companies that have great product led companies that are looking at metrics, looking at data. TikTok is famous for the algorithm. In fact, people say that the TikTok algorithm is significantly better than that of Facebook, which has been which has existed for many more years, and that's essentially just being incredibly data oriented in helping them approach things. And as we've seen the results of it, TikTok has gotten to 1 billion users faster than any other company, and it's worth over $1 billion. So with that, we'd love to take questions here and open it up. And I would also love some feedback. So if you can go to, this will only take you literally 5 seconds to do. If you can just go to thankyou.pm. Again, that's www.thankyou.pm. I'd love to get some feedback on the presentation and how it went for you guys. So would love this 1 minute feedback, and happy to take some questions.
Okay, we were muted, but the pain of going online. That was great. That was great. Please offer a feedback to Mo. Mo needs info and data too, and we're here to provide some data for him. That's how we know he's a product manager. Now, regarding questions, we've got a couple from our audience, but I would like to start with one of mine because I'm co-presenting, so I have this opportunity to ask my own question. And I think Mihai, you have one yourself, right?
Yeah. You go ahead.
Right. Okay. So I'll go from the beginning. You said if you don't follow metrics, you are basically a project manager, right? So are really analytics what defines a product manager nowadays? Is it the only thing that we should be doing besides gathering information from customer interviews and so on? What kind of data would you rely your decisions on most? Is it like metrics and data that you collect from like high volume of users, or is it qualitative research that you recommend mostly?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Teresa Torres's work on continuous discovery. So I believe that it's incredibly valuable for product managers, to have a continuous flow of information, interaction with their customers. So that is your qualitative information coming to you all the time. Now, there's a lot of fancy tools out there. You can do design sprints, you can do ethnographic research, you can do all this other stuff. But let's say you have time for none of them. You don't have any time for any of those. That's okay. You must do customer interviews, and you must do them on a continuous basis. That's number one. But aside from that, that's your qualitative data. On the quant side, you are looking at the data that's coming in through metrics, and that's telling you a lot about how you're doing, right? So if you boil down, you just simplify product into its essence, it's all around hypothesis-based product management. You take away all the fancy words and the things that are happening, it's around having a hypothesis. And when you have a hypothesis, you need to have a hypothesis on how it's going to perform, right? And to do that, you need metrics. So it's sort of really, really foundational for product managers and product leaders to be using metrics to do well. And frankly, metrics can be really complicated, but we believe that our product faculty's framework of looking at things from a retention-based standpoint is really powerful. There's a lot of other frameworks out there, HEART framework, AARR, but really they don't tell you they don't tell you what is more important than something else. Whereas the simple curve for most products can tell you a lot about how you're performing.
Right, and just a very quick add-on that I would like you to answer in a very short manner is: do you believe the phrase "data tells you what's going on, not why it's happening" is true or false?
100%, I believe that's true. So data is going to tell you information, but it's not going to tell you why.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, Mihai, do we have a question from you?
Yeah, I've prepared one question, but I just want to link your conversation with one thought that I've heard yesterday. Somebody was giving the example of Steve Jobs, who went to Intel, I think, and he approached them in 2007 to have the chips done with them. And they've said that, look, the data is showing that it's not necessarily the good decision. And the CEO said afterwards that my gut feeling told me that it's a good opportunity, but still I've listened to the data. So then I think it's I'm not sure if there's like a sweet spot where you should also make a little bit spot for your gut feeling other than data, but I feel, at least in my personal experience, sometimes it's makes sense to do that as well.
Yeah, your data is going to tell you how you're performing on your existing product and how to make that better. But it's not going to tell you net new things and innovations and how do you get in front of the S curve. And so that for that type of thing, you definitely do need your gut to help you get ahead of the S curve. But you know, a lot of people aren't even doing the basics of being data informed, let alone data driven or even having data.
Fair enough. I really liked how you've phrased this. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first question asked by Manas. How do you measure retentions for product where frequency of usage is not
is low? I think it's meant to be. It's low, like Airbnb.
It's low.
Yeah. So again, there's two sides to the marketplace for Airbnb. There is the people that are booking a vacation, which is happening once a year, right? You're not happening more than that. And the other side is people that are homeowners, right? That are listing their house and wants to get revenue from that. So for the marketplace side of things, which are you know, homeowners, it's really valuable to have strong retention. You want people to come and stay at your place, and you want to make sure you measure that and see how you're doing. But this is a good point. Look, you can have great products with lower retention. Airbnb is a perfect example of that. So it's not always valuable. As I said, if you go back to the very first slide where I talked about the different types of products and where it's relevant, it's not always relevant. There are certain cases, but even in the case of Airbnb, there is a side of the market where retention is really important. But you know, in the case of Airbnb, the host or the person who's taking a vacation, it is less important. But there are other ways that Airbnb will keep you engaged. Have you noticed that they're sending you emails? Right, even though you're taking your frequency of booking a vacation is once a year, I get monthly updates on, hey, these are vacation spots, because what Airbnb wants to catch me at the time that I am taking my vacation. So even though their you know, frequency of usage, organic usage is 1 year, they're still sending you monthly updates, because when it comes time for you to take the vacation, they don't want you to go to Marriott. They don't want you to go to Holiday Inn. They want you to remember Airbnb, and they've introduced their, you know, the emails to help you keep on top of it. Again, we weren't able to go over a lot of this, but you want to make sure that you're not bothering your customers. Any more than monthly updates will be annoying, and I'd unsubscribe. So you want to be very, very careful when you're using the different channels that are available to you to remind your customers. Using any more than what's organically natural will lead you to spam and you know, cut off that channel that you have with customers. Great question.
What about that? I just want to ask you something there to continue on this. What about, let's say you're booking a vacation once a year, but then you still have once a year, you still have an interaction with Airbnb in this case. So can't you find a key metric within that slot of you interacting with to measure if the customers are more engaged? For example, you would say that, okay, this year I came and I booked a vacation and I've looked over 15 properties and I've spent 20 minutes. And next year, if I'm watching more, if I'm spending more time and I'm watching more properties or I'm chatting more, that's still a good sign that retention is growing on the other side of the market. What do you think about this?
I don't know if I fully agree with that. I think it's binary, right? You're either booking or you're not. In fact, if you're spending more time booking a vacation, it could potentially be looked at as negative for Airbnb, because if you're spending a lot of time finding what you need, it means that the platform isn't helping you. We had the same problem in grocery shopping, right? So for engagement type products, you're trying to maximize the time spent on the product. For revenue products, where I worked as a product lead for online grocery, we want people to shop for their groceries as fast as possible, right? If they're in the product really, really long time, it could be because they're not finding items that they're looking for, and it could be a negative thing. So I'd say your key action is still nights booked for Airbnb.
Okay.
I don't work at Airbnb, but like my hypothesis around their key action is nights booked.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I'm moving to the next question from Jose Luis. I have my intuition tells me here, but I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. So if you own a content web page with transactional business through affiliates, how to define a key action there?
If you own a content web page with transactional business through affiliates, how do you define key action for it? So the very, very first thing you have to do is understand, hey, what type of business is this? Is this engagement? Is it revenue? Is it a SaaS business, productivity, or is it a utility? So what I'm getting here is that it's a content web page with transactional business, which means a revenue-based business through affiliates. So the key action, so the way that money is made would be through transactions happening on the site. So the key action would be the purchasing of items, right? So if you're in a revenue-based business, then your key action has to be tied to revenue. For online grocery, it's order placed. For Amazon, it's items bought, right? So this is definitely that. Now, if you are an engagement business, then you're trying to maximize the time spent on the platform. So that could be a time-based, spending 30 seconds, spending 1 minute, spending 5 minutes, depending on the type of business that you're in. It's tempting to say, oh, we're in two types of businesses. No, but pick one. It's always advisable to narrow down and pick one. I hope I answered that question, but I don't know if I understood it correctly. Feel free to correct me if I didn't.
All right. We have a question from Kevin. And it's what tool can we use to track efficiently our customers' retention?
Yeah, so look, here's the honest tool. Here's the honest truth. All the tools are going to help you get there really, really well. Don't use Google Analytics because that's a marketing tool. But whether you use Amplitude or you use Mixpanel or you're using Heap or you're using Pendo, I know they'll like to say that the tools are different. And Amplitude is one of our sponsors. I do love them. But all the tools are going to help you get there in the same manner. Now, there's two different sort of philosophies there. There's the auto track versus not. That's one thing you need to understand. Hey, what type of tool do I want? Do I want a tool that will automatically track, which has some issues around accuracy, or do I want a tool where I'm setting up events for everything that I'm tracking, which is more accurate, but a little bit more work up front. But literally, all of them will help you get there. And the good thing is, hey, all of them have free tiers. Amplitude has a free tier. Mixpanel has a free tier. Pendo, Heap, all of them have free products that you can use and try out.
And I would like to add to this. I personally work with lots of MVPs and prototypes, and I personally use Google Sheets a lot. Just collecting the data, the raw data from the DB, and putting it in a worksheet in a Google Sheet, and can use pivot tables and whatnot. It's just as effective, for a start. I mean, unless you're having thousands and thousands of rows. Yeah.
How easy is it to understand your cohort analysis, right? Like, hey, you launch a new product, you want to know if it's successful or not? Well, track it over 8 weeks and see, do 20% of the customers remain? Mixpanel give you benchmarks. If yes, you found product market fit. If none of your users remain, you haven't found product market fit. You need to do more work.
Exactly. So I think regarding tools, it depends on what you need at that exact moment. But you actually made a very interesting point there, and I would like to talk about this for a little. You said don't use Google Analytics, which is I personally worked a lot with Google Analytics. I'm not a fan of it. I'm not here to to contradict you. I would like you to expand on that idea. Why is Google Analytics a bad deal?
Yeah, so what I meant with Google Analytics is a marketing tool. So if you're a growth product manager, fine, you can use Google Analytics, right? But for your product analytics, the tools that are out there are significantly richer. And Google Analytics is designed for marketers. So sure, when I say don't use it, I didn't mean it like that. I meant it's free, use it. Absolutely use it. But for your product analytics, get a little bit more serious. Use one of the tools that are available to you, like Heap, Pendo, mixed panel amplitude to go a lot deeper specifically for product, because it's going to really enlighten you and allow you to be much more valuable in your company.
Got it. All right. Let's pick a next question. Galen Hughes says a semantic question. Oh, you went to the next one. Yeah, that one. A persona in the graph shown is representative to the largest cohort they sit in. I think it was about your presentation.
So semantic question: a persona in the graph shows is a representative of larger cohort they sit in. A persona is essentially so when you're thinking about finding product market fit on your first product, right? You have a core user base that you're trying to find product market fit on. So I'll give you an example. Online grocery, our main persona initially were suburban moms that don't have a lot of time to shop. So that's persona A. We found product market fit on it. Great. Then what we saw was that school boards, grocery stores, or other organizations were using the product too. Now the product was really bad for them. So they would use it, but they weren't using it in an effective manner. So that's a different persona that you can start to optimize for to go with. So initially you're solving for your largest cohort, largest persona, but then following that you solve for smaller cohorts and smaller personas that you optimize for their retention.
Right.
Yeah.
We have Jamil who's asking us to go back to his question because we missed it. I'm sorry, Jamil. It wasn't intentional.
Yeah, sorry as well. I saw this question earlier, and I'm quite curious on the approach from Mo.
Okay, I'm facing a problem where our experiences marketplace is getting a lot of traffic, but very minimal conversion. How do you approach this? So if you have a marketplace that's getting a lot of traffic and not a lot of conversion, there's a couple of hypotheses there, right? So first of all, congratulations on getting a lot of traffic, because that's like really, really hard to do. Now there's a couple of hypotheses there. The key hypothesis that I have is, hey, you're first of all attracting the wrong audience, right? So who you bring into your product, depending on the audience, they're going to either like your product or they're not going to like your product. So the key advice would be to narrow down a certain niche and start to optimize your marketplace for that niche. Now, I'm going to take the liberty of assuming that this is a newer marketplace. And for newer marketplaces and newer startups, the problem they have is they try to go for everyone as a customer. If you want to 10x your perceived value immediately, 10x your focus. So narrow down on a profitable niche and then expand from there, right? So if you're not getting traffic, it could be because people come. It's 100% because people are not finding what they want. So they're not finding what they want is because there's a persona to product mismatch. So I would narrow down the niche and look through there. The other thing I would look is, do you have some obvious, blatant issues with conversion? Like, you look at your funnel, are like people not even getting to page 2? Are a lot of people not getting through the checkout flow? So assuming that there's no blatant issues there, then you want to start to narrow down your niche.
I'd also want to share some experiment that I've done with one of my projects where I've looked very carefully in the channels which were driving the traffic, and it was obvious that the organic traffic was driving very healthy conversion rates. But I was very surprised to find out that my paid traffic was very far behind on the conversion rates on what we thought we are targeting the more or less the same audience. But the difference was absolutely huge. We are still experimenting with that. But just
organic traffic always converts better than paid. Always.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, hey, it's the same thing of, hey, you can talk about how great you are, but as soon as one other person says you're great, that's really where you're going to grow. And that's so there is a massive difference between organic and word versus paid traffic.
Yeah. So then to link this back to Jamil, I'm not sure if you're looking at if you have the same discrepancy between different channels, and probably if your organic traffic is dropping a lot, then yeah, you might have an issue somewhere else down the line with your checkout or with the content, or yeah, who knows.
Value proposition.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like for Jamil, they haven't found product market fit. So if you haven't found product market fit, you got to go to work. You got to figure out, hey, which persona am I targeting? What features am I offering? Do those features match? If they don't match, I need to fix it. Is there any like really obvious problems with conversions on the site? Like just look at your funnel flow and see the checkout flow. Are people getting lost there? So I would diagnose it that way.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great. So let's take one or two more questions and
sure. Can you measure retention for a B2B product by looking at something else than they bought it X times this year? And if yes, what would it be?
Yeah, so very interesting. There's a really famous investor, Tom Tunges, and what he did was he said, "Hey, for B2B products, let's look at what drives the strongest valuation for a B2B product." He thought, could it be sales? Could it be some other factors? What he found was negative churn or account expansion or retention for B2B products was the strongest indicator of the company's value. So even for B2B products, retention is super important. I was the director of product at Path Factory, where we built a B2B product for companies like Microsoft, Cisco, Intel. We sold it for $120,000 a year. Now, the number one thing we checked when it came to account renewals, hey, what's their retention like? Have they had usage? And if they hadn't had any usage or their retention was poor, we knew it was going to be a lot of work. We're going to find it very tough to save that sale, right? So whether it's B2B products or it's B2C products, retention is a strong indicator of your customer value going into the future.
Okay, interesting. I think we've covered most of the questions.
Awesome. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn and happy to chat further. Like I only shared sort of 5% of what we cover, so there's a lot more involved in metrics. But hope that was helpful.
Absolutely.
No, it did. And just to reiterate what I've tried to say earlier when my line dropped, following Mo on LinkedIn will give you the perfect dose of product-related knowledge. So I encourage you guys to go ahead and follow him.
Definitely. Awesome, guys. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and then we'll keep in touch. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
See ya.